All right, guys, before we get into today's video, I want to let you all know that the new hoodies are in. They're live on the web store now, printed on Champion authentic pullover hoodies. These things are super comfortable. Brand new logos and designs in a colorway I haven't done before, and on garments I haven't printed on before. I'm super excited to have these printed on Champions. I think you guys are gonna love them. They're available now on the web store, ludwigsgarage.com. There's a link in the video's description below. I wanna thank you guys for all of your support. I will be doing more of these once this batch is sold out. Now, let's get on with the video. In the last episode, you guys saw me finally get the body cut away enough to sit down where I'm gonna need it on the beetle pan. But that left the motor sticking a little too far up out of the engine bay, or what will be the engine bay, and might hit the trunk lid, which I'm not going to cut holes in to simply put a fan shroud to stick up out of. I have a Puma fan shroud, as you guys saw in that last episode, and I think what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna put that on this motor. So I'm gonna take everything off I need to, pull this stock fan shroud out. This motor is going in the 1960 BMW 700. Since that has a single port 1500 in it, with a bad head. I'm pretty sure I've got a stuck valve that I've been fighting for a while. I keep losing compression in that cylinder, and last time I drove it, it was just barely running, and I just kind of parked it in the corner and left it. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to run a Type 3 motor in the Auto Union, a pancake motor. Well, now that we've got the shrouds side by side, you can really see how much lower the Puma shroud is compared to the US market stock shroud. Some of you guys may have noticed this, especially the Volkswagen guys who knew this right from the get-go. But what I didn't notice until now was the Puma shroud here on the front side of the shroud itself is flat, just like the 1500 shroud that's in the BMW 700. This 1600 shroud, the front side, has this whole extra casing, which I didn't realize until now houses the oil cooler. And so I'm kind of learning this as I go. I've done a little bit poking around online, but the oil cooler has an offset adapter where it mounts. So where this channel opening is where the shroud sits down. And as you can see, the oil cooler sits in front of that, not in line. So that shroud won't fit down over this oil cooler. What I'm hoping is if the new oil cooler I put in my 1500, which sits straight up and down inside the shroud, if that'll mount underneath where this adapter goes. So I'm going to pull this off, and I'm going to pull the one off the 1500 and see if it'll mount to this motor. That way I can run my Puma shroud on the 1600. After reading up on this, it actually makes sense why they moved the oil cooler ahead outside of the shroud, basically, was because this will allow for more air to get to cylinders 3 and 4 and provide more cooling, whereas the upright inside the 1500 and inside the Puma shroud basically blocks some cooling, and those cylinders can run hotter. So it makes sense. It's obviously going backwards in a design aspect to take this out and put a cooler, which would essentially be blocking some better airflow. But I might do that for now to just get the motor in the 700 and get it ready in time for Eurotripper, and then look at doing a remote mounted oil cooler in the future. All right, well, I got the Corvair outside in a little slight window of no rain today. Got the wheels back on the pan, got the motor off the pan. What I'm doing now is I'm gonna get the 700 over on the lift. But I think next step is more than likely going to admit defeat on an upright motor in the Auto Union. I don't think the upright motor is gonna work with how low I really want the body to lay out on the ground. And I'd much rather the body sit down over the pan a little bit more. So when the body's completely laid out, the suspension on the pan isn't completely exhausted. That way when I'm driving it, it doesn't have a ton of negative camber in the rear. That's the one thing I hate about these swing arm rears, is it gets so much camber in the rear. So if you want to drive the car low, your wheels are cranked right in. Okay, so gonna get the 700 pushed ahead. So gonna get that out of the corner, probably put the pan in the corner, get the Auto Union down on some dollies, get that pushed over here, get the Corvair inside. All right, well, the 700's in the lift bay for the first time in quite a while. It's been sitting in the back corner of the shop for what seems like months. It has been months, but it seems like much longer than that. So I think what I'm gonna do first is I'm just gonna pull the fan shroud off of this 1500 with the 700 on the ground. That way I can get the oil cooler off and make sure it'll work on the 1600. All right, well, I got the oil cooler out of the 1500, and it's clear right away that stud sizes are different, and the eyelet on that ear for the stud that's on the actual block is wrong as well. So the stud on the 1600 block here is a little bit larger. That's fit for a 13 mil nut, and the ones on the 1500 oil cooler are for 10 millimeter nuts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get a measurement on the actual ports and see if they're the same size, same spacing, and if I can just drill this out for the bigger stud and make it work. We'll see. So the only difference between the factory 1500 shroud and the factory 1600 thing shroud is these heater ports, these air ports on, I guess would be the front side of the motor. So the 1600 doesn't have those, which gives it a much cleaner look in my opinion, especially if you're not going to use them. And on the back side of them, there's the added casing for the offset oil cooler on the 1600. But they're basically the same shape. And you'll see on the 1500, what we did was the front part of the top of the shroud is what wouldn't clear the trunk closing. I notched basically a cross member in the trunk to give myself some more clearance. Was not going to cut a hole in that trunk lid, as just like the Auto Union, the 700 is a super rare car, so did not want to cut any holes in that trunk lid. But since the back would fit up underneath the rain tray, the front was really all that was hitting. So what we did was we cut some slits in it and angled the front of it down, overlapped it, siliconed it up, and riveted it just to kind of make it more airtight. And that allowed for the trunk to shut. I've decided to alter the oil cooler to be able to run the Puma shroud. That way everything fits underneath this trunk lid with no modifications needed. Unfortunately, the generator cradle and fill neck won't house my 90 amp alternator. The housing here has a significant step out. The larger part of the diameter of the alternator is sitting on this stand and keeping it from sitting underneath the carburetor where it needs to go. So I'm going to pull the alternator stand off the 1500 and see if it works on this and gives me all the clearances I need to both get the Puma shroud down where it needs to be and get the alternator mounted and underneath the carburetor without rubbing up against anything. So that's my next step. All right, well, I got the oil filler neck generator stand off the 1600 and got the one off the 1500 installed. So basically this was just a test fit to make sure everything would work properly. The alternator is clearancing the carburetor. So what I'm gonna do now is take everything back off, and I do not have a good gasket for the alternator stand to where it mounts to the block. So what I think I'm gonna do is I'm going to design one and laser cut one out, since my 100-watt laser machine is capable of laser cutting cork and gasket material. I just so happen to have a small sheet of gasket material, and I think what I'll do next is I'll get that disassembled again. We'll go to the computer, we'll design something up real quick, and we'll laser cut a custom gasket for that alternator stand. A gasket goes between this and this piece, and then between this piece and the actual engine block. So as you can see here, I've got one designed, and it's basically what the factory gaskets look like. I'm not a formally trained CAD designer, so I know that I probably take the long way around on this stuff, It's just how I kind of like self-taught myself how to make this. So I know there's probably 100 different ways to do this much faster and much easier, but this is how I know to do it. All right, well, I got some construction paper in the machine. I got everything lined up. Gonna make a quick cut and get one cut out of paper. See if it mates up pretty close. All right, well, there's my first test gasket. Now it's not symmetrical. It's not 3" by 3". It's basically 3 inches by 3 1/16. So it's not perfectly symmetrical. I think that's pretty good. That's not bad. Looks like everything lines up almost perfectly. Yeah, I'm really happy with that. So I need 2, so I'm gonna get this set up to cut 1 more, and we'll have a pair of these things ready to install. All right, well, I think that completes the 1600 as I may need it in the BMW 700. So I think the next episode, I'll be doing a valve adjustment on the 1600 since it's out and it's easier to get to. Before the 700 goes up on the lift and I pull that single port out and the motor swap will begin. I want to thank you guys so much for all of the support, for helping the channel hit 10,000 subscribers. It was the goal for me for 2022, having started that year with 5,000 subscribers here on the channel. It doubled. We hit 10,000 just about last week. So before the end of the first month of the year, I'm still counting it as a win for 2022. Really excited about what's to come for 2023. Maybe we can hit 20,000 subscribers this year and double this. Who knows? Either way, I'm super excited to bring you guys along with all the projects on deck here in the shop. The links to both the Patreon and the web store are in the video's description below if you want to help support the shop and the channel. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next episode.